The following program contains mature subject matter. Viewer discretion is advised.
Randall Bledsoe had an extremely strict routine. Each morning he would wake up promptly at 6 a.m. He would dress in his jogging suit and head downstairs. His wife, Evelyn, would have his first cup of coffee made for him, 2 sugars and 1 cream, each and every day. He would sit and sip the hot liquid, waking his other senses up. He would watch Evelyn prepare his breakfast, which would be ready as soon as he was back from his jog around the block. She would make his 2 eggs over easy, crispy bacon, grapefruit, orange juice, and a second cup of steaming hot coffee. Only on the weekends would he break this routine and allow her to cook pancakes. Even then, he expected it to be ready as soon as he returned. Evelyn had grown accustomed to the strict routine. She had to, for she found out early on what breaking her husband's routine meant. "What is this?" Randall had asked her one Thursday evening as she brought out the pot roast and set it on the dining room table. "I thought we might break the routine," she had told him. She had worked most of the afternoon on the dinner and was quite proud of the way that everything had turned out. The meat was tender, as well as the carrots, potatoes, and onions. The salad that she had prepared a few minutes before her husband had arrived home, promptly at 5:30, was crisp with iceberg lettuce, tomatoes, shredded carrots, cucumber, and his favorite dressing. "What day is it?" he asked, his voice hollow. "Why, it's Thursday," she had replied. She began cutting the meat into proper proportions for each of them. "Well," he said with a menacing smile, "you at least know that much. Perhaps then you can tell me what we have for dinner on Thursday." She looked up at him and a slight chill ran through her. They had only been married for 3 months after a whirlwind romance. She had fallen in love with his good looks, his aristocratic manners, and of course the wealth helped a little as well. He seemed to be everything that she had dreamed of. The only thing about him was the damned routine that he had. She had thought that she could adjust, but it was becoming difficult with every passing day since their honeymoon. "I thought that we could break away from the usual fish night," she told him. "This was a recipe that was taught to me by my mother, and I knew that my father enjoyed it." "You know," he began, placing his elbows under the table, "my day at work can be a little tedious sometimes. There are the meetings, the salespeople that I must deal with, the enormous amount of paperwork that always hits my desk, and yet there is one thing that I can always count on. When things get a little overwhelming, I sit back and think of the day, in this case, Thursday. And do you know what I think about?" She could only shake her head. "I think about the wonderful fish dinner that my wife is cooking for me," he said, with that smile that she had grown to loathe. "It is the one thing that I can count on, no matter how bad or good the day is going. So I arrive this evening, and to my surprise, I do not smell the aroma of fish, complete with hush puppies, coleslaw, and a glass of wine. No, instead, I smell some sort of dish that I have never eaten in my life." Her apprehension at that point was rising. He had never raised a hand to her in the 3-month marriage, had never shown her any anger, but right now she was wondering if he was capable. The look in his eye assured her that he was. After a silence that seemed to last for an eternity, he simply stood up, took the food back into the kitchen, and deposited serving plates and food into the garbage can. He then returned to the table and sat down. She dared not say a word. "You now realize that my entire schedule is completely thrown off," he said in a menacing tone. I am going to leave. Go down to the local diner where I know that they serve a fish dinner. I shall eat at a leisurely pace, and return sometime this evening. You shall sit at this table and think about the consequences of your actions. You shall remain here until I return. He stood up and headed for the front door. Before leaving, he turned to her and said, Do not think about eating or even getting out of that chair. If you do, I will know it. You don't want me to return to find you out of the dining room chair. She heard him start the car and leave. It was almost 10 o'clock that evening when he finally returned. She had not dared to move from the chair. There was something in his voice, some tonality that made her very afraid of him for the first time since meeting him. It had never been there before, but she had heard it and was now very afraid of him. He walked in and set a burger that he had obviously purchased hours ago in front of her. Without another word, he walked upstairs and headed for bed. That had been almost 5 years ago. Evelyn had thought of leaving him many times. She had been putting money aside for just such an emergency. She had made plans and had even consulted an attorney about a divorce. It was one evening that he said, If you ever try to leave me, you will regret it. It was all that was needed to be said, and Evelyn, afraid of him, had never tried to leave. She had his breakfast on the table just as he walked in the door from his morning jog. She would eat after he left for the office. After leaving her, she would then begin her morning routine. This would include washing the dishes, the laundry, and general cleaning of their spacious home, and then planning the evening's meal, which would adhere to his strict menu. At least this was not a day to go to the grocery store, so she would have some free time in the afternoon. These were the days that she looked forward to the most. It gave her a brief respite from the mundane existence that she now found herself in. Looking back on the last 5 years, she was beginning to think again of leaving him. Although he had never physically abused her, it was the verbal jabs that hurt her the most. A person can only take so much berating. The soft scratching on the door brought her out of her reverie. She sighed and wondered what normal people do if they had been in the situation that she was in now. Walking to the front door, she opened it to find a small puppy. You shouldn't be here, she told the furry creature. The puppy only looked up at her, its eyes wide and scared. Where did you come from? She asked it. Bending down, she picked up the small animal, looking first to see that it was indeed a male. The puppy nestled against her, making a soft sound. You know that I can't keep you, she told the ball of fur. Closing the door, she carried it to the kitchen. My husband will not allow any kind of animal to cross this threshold. Not even a goldfish, she thought to herself. Pulling out a bowl, she filled it with water and set it on the floor. Setting the puppy beside it, she smiled as it dipped its nose into the liquid and began lapping it up. You are too cute for words, she said, sitting at the kitchen table. I wonder what kind of dog you are. The word mongrel crept into her mind. Maybe I should call you Scruffy, she decided, although she knew that she would have to call someone to come and collect it. The pup looked up at her with those wide eyes. It was almost telling her that everything would be all right. Her heart melted when she looked into those eyes. Oh, let's just see what we can do, she told him. I will probably regret this, but at this point, I really don't care. The puppy seemed to smile up at her. Randall Bledsoe returned home that evening just as he always did at exactly 5:30. As he entered, he saw that the table was completely set for dinner. He smelled the familiar aroma of a medium-well steak, baked potato, and a fresh salad. Evelyn greeted him with a smile and a kiss. You seem a little nervous tonight, he commented as he cut into his steak. No, she said, a bit quickly. Not really nervous, I guess, just glad that you are home. Really? He asked, eyeing her closely. Why would you be glad that I was home? Evelyn thought quickly and answered. I was watching the news earlier. There was some story about an escaped convict that was being transferred to the prison. I didn't catch the whole story, but it was enough to make me worry. Randall digested this along with a bite of steak and said, It was refreshing that you worry about me. I'm sure that you think long and hard on ways to get rid of me, don't you?" "Why would you say that?" Evelyn asked. "I know that you watch those murder mystery shows," he told her, grabbing into the potato. "I suspect that you are doing research." She smiled and said, "I'm just interested, that's all." "I would have thought that you would be more interested in learning how to cook better," he said, wiping his lips. "Is the steak not to your liking?" she asked apprehensively. He stared down at the half-eaten meat and said, "I've had better. Even the cook at the Waffle House has done better than this." Yet another jab, she thought. "At least you can't screw up a salad," he said as he took another forkful of lettuce smothered in ranch dressing. She looked down at her own steak knife. How easy would it be to jab it into her husband's neck, watching the blood spurt over the food and the table. What a wonderful feeling of elation she would feel as he clutched at his throat, trying to stave off the flow of blood. How joyous she would feel as he looked up at her before collapsing and, "Did you hear me?" he asked, his voice a little loud. I'm sorry," she told him, still looking at the steak knife. He put his napkin over the remainder of his meal and said, "I asked you if you mailed those letters yet." Her brain raced, trying to remember if she had indeed put the letters into the mailbox this morning. She could not think. Her entire mind was on the murder of the man who had made her into a personal servant for the last 5 years. "Yes, I did," she finally said. "You did not say that as if you were sure," he said with a touch of menace. "I'm sure, Randall," she said firmly. "So if I were to go to the study right now," he said slowly, rising up from the dining room table, "the stamped envelopes would no longer be on the desk, correct?" Evelyn panicked slightly. She nodded. "You don't seem to be as sure as you were a moment ago, my dear," he told her, his voice now dripping with menace. "I mailed them," she said firmly. Randall only smiled, patting the leather belt that he always wore. He turned and walked toward the living room. She waited, her breath catching in her throat. While Randall had never once struck her, she was always in constant fear that there would be a first time. She breathed a sigh of relief when she heard the television go on. She stood up and began to clear away the dishes. Taking the unfinished steak, she placed it on a paper towel. Quietly, she made her way out the kitchen door and to the tool shed. The puppy lay quietly on an old blanket that she had managed to find. She was so grateful that the little thing had not made a sound. She put the meat next to him and scratched behind his ears. This brought a grateful wag of its tail. He nudged the meat before tearing into it. "Just please don't make a sound tonight," she told it. "I know how puppies can be when left alone at night. You just be quiet. We might both end up on the street." The puppy wagged its tail again and continued to eat. She was quietly closing the back kitchen door, hoping that Randall was still watching the news. "Where have you been?" he asked her. She turned quickly and saw him standing in the doorway. "I thought that I heard something outside," she told him. "With an escaped lunatic on the loose, I would have guessed that you would have asked me to have a look," he said. "Why don't I have a look around?" "I don't think that it is necessary," she said quickly. He smiled at her and patted his belt. "Why don't we both have a look?" he said forcefully. Randall opened the door. Taking his wife's arm, he escorted her to the tool shed. "Is there anything that you want to tell me?" he asked her, his teeth clenched. Evelyn stood silent. Randall opened the tool shed, turned on the light, and looked around. "I guess our tool shed isn't good enough for an escaped convict to hide in," he said before walking back into the house. Evelyn stood surprised. She looked in and saw nothing. There was no puppy, nor one warm blanket, and no unfinished steak. Maybe the puppy heard Randall and found a way out somewhere, she thought. Oh, right, her mind told her, like a puppy is going to escape a locked tool shed, drag a blanket out along with its din-din. Evelyn walked back into the house. The next day, about a half hour after Randall had left for work, Evelyn heard the now familiar scratching at the kitchen door. Practically running from the living room, she flung open the door. "Scruffy!" she exclaimed. Lifting the ball of fur into her arms, she accepted the numerous licks and the happy wagging of its tail. She petted and held the animal for a good 5 minutes before letting it onto the floor. "I don't know how you managed to get out of the shed," she told it, "but I am sure glad that you did." "Damn it!" Randall slammed his fist onto the kitchen table. He stood up and walked over to his cowering wife. "Why can't you learn to make pork chops correctly?" he asked her, towering above her. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Well, that is what I would expect a whimpering little girl to say," he told her. He began to remove his belt. "Randall, please," Evelyn begged. "I think," he said, wrapping the belt around his tight fist, "that I should have done this 5 years ago." "Please," she screamed. Evelyn stood in the kitchen the next morning. Her back was still hurting from the beating that she had received the night before. The welts were still red and angry, and this morning they had hurt even worse. She had not been able to sleep and had spent much of the night sitting in the living room. She had wished that the little puppy had been there to console her. She looked at the clock. Randall would be coming downstairs, ready for his morning jog. She put the coffee onto the table. She promised herself that this would be the one and only time that she would feel this way. The morning air was brisk, and Randall took a deep breath before beginning to jog down the driveway. He was feeling quite refreshed after explaining to his wife the way things were and the way things were going to be. His hand hurt slightly, but he knew that the pain was minuscule compared to what she must be feeling. She would definitely remember who the master of the house was, he thought to himself. He jogged to the corner before making the right turn. Out of the corner of his eye, he thought that he saw a small puppy following him. Upon making his way to the next corner, he turned right again. From the corner of his eye, he swore that he now saw a medium-sized dog. He turned quickly, jogging in place to keep his rhythm going and his heart rate up. The dog looked a lot like the puppy that he had seen only a few minutes before. Perhaps this was the mother of the mutt. As he turned back, he made a mental note to call the dog pound. He never liked dogs, and this one looked like quite the brute. If it were the mother of the puppy, it could possibly be dangerous and therefore would have to be put down. Rounding the next corner, he jogged a little up the street before turning around again. The dog, if that was what it was now twice the size of the previous one. It was standing at the corner, staring at Randall, its teeth bared and its eyes boring a hole into him. Randall was beginning to get nervous. He had never seen the animal in the neighborhood before. He would definitely call someone to have the beast eradicated from his jogging block. As he rounded the last corner, he saw Mrs. Murphy, their neighbor across the street, working as she always did in her garden. He did not particularly care for the elderly woman, but waved to her just the same whenever she was outside during his morning jog. He smiled at her, but she did not smile back. He stopped, still jogging in place, and waved to her again. He watched as she stood up, her hand covering her mouth, her other hand pointing to something that was behind him. He saw her quickly run into her home. He turned and wished that he hadn't. The knock on the door startled Evelyn. She was even more surprised when she opened the door to find 2 police officers and a man in a suit standing on her doorstep. "May I help you?" she asked. "Are you Mrs. Bledsoe?" the man in the suit asked. "Yes, I'm Evelyn Bledsoe," she answered. "Is there anything wrong?" "May I come in, Mrs. Bledsoe?" the man asked. "These other men can wait outside." Evelyn opened the door a little more and escorted the man in the suit into the living room. Offering him some coffee, which he declined, she sat in the easy chair across from the sofa and motioned for him to sit down. "Mrs. Bledsoe," he began, "I'm Detective Bernard Shea from the 3rd Precinct. I'm afraid that I have some rather disturbing news." Evelyn could not speak. "I'm afraid that your husband has been killed," he told her. It was the part of the job that Detective Shea hated the most. He was too old for this and had already been counting the days to retirement. After seeing what he had seen today, early retirement was looking better and better. "Killed?" she asked him. "How?" "Apparently," he began, "he was out jogging when he was attacked by a dog. Your neighbor, Mrs. Jennifer Murphy, saw the attack. She was the one that called it in. How could a dog kill someone? Evelyn asked. Unfortunately, it has happened more often than not, he told her. Was your husband in the habit of jogging in the morning? Yeah, every morning, she told him. I'm sorry, I just don't know what to do. I understand. We have men checking the neighborhood, seeing if they can find what Mrs. Murphy described. You don't sound too sure, she said. In reality, the detective had no doubt that the thing that Mrs. Murphy described would ever be found. He looked down at his notes and saw the words long fangs, shaggy red hair, and extremely long talons, and only shook his head. Turning the page of his notebook, he opted not to tell the wife that her husband's head had been ripped away from the body. The coroner who examined the body measured the bite marks and determined that the dog, or whatever it was, would have been 15 feet in height. Well, the detective said, placing the notebook back into his pocket, these sorts of accidents happen. We may find the dog and we may not. Chances are it has run off to some other part of the city and you may never see it again. So you don't think that there is any danger? She asked, her voice breaking slightly. The detective shifted his weight a little, trying to convey how uncomfortable he really was. I don't think so, he reassured her. For the first time, Evelyn smiled. The small padded feet brought the puppy into the room. I see that you have a dog, the detective said, smiling. Evelyn picked up the small ball of fur and began to stroke its ear. His name is Scruffy, she told him. I think that he is a stray or someone dropped him off. Well, he looks mighty handsome for such a little guy, the detective said. He slowly let the puppy smell his hand before petting him. Very friendly, too, Detective Shea commented. I'm pretty sure that this is not the culprit that we are after. I don't think that he could hurt a fly, Evelyn told him. Detective Shea took out a business card and handed it to Evelyn. I'm not sure what I could tell you, she told him, taking her card. Oh, no, he told her. That is just in case you have trouble claiming the remains. I'm sure that there will not have to be an autopsy. However, the crime lab will still have to have your husband for a little while. Thank you, she told him, as they walked toward the front door. Detective Shea smiled at the little puppy again, scratching its ears. You know, he began, my wife has 2 dogs. She loves them, I think, more than me. Evelyn chuckled and said, Oh, I don't think so. Yeah, you're probably right, he agreed. Our anniversary is coming up, and I have got something incredibly special planned. She will be so surprised. How long have you been married? Evelyn asked. 25 years, he said proudly. Our 2 boys have already graduated college and have lives of their own. That was why I got the 2 dogs, so my wife wouldn't be lonely while I was working. Well, that was very thoughtful, Evelyn said. You seem like a very caring husband. Well, he admitted, let us just say that I try to be the best man in her life, since she is the best woman in mine. I honestly don't see what she ever saw in me. She saw something, Evelyn told him, and sometimes that is all that it takes. I guess you're right, Mrs. Bledsoe, the detective said as he opened the front door. Again, my condolences. Thank you, she said. Closing the door, she turned and returned to the sofa. She set the puppy beside her. She was finally able to breathe again. She wondered what the detective would have said if he had walked in and seen the circled pentagram drawn in chalk on the floor, or the white and black candles that she had managed to put away just as he had knocked. She smiled as she petted Scruffy on the head. Looking at the little puppy, she saw the small trace of matted blood on its lower jaw. Let me get that cleaned up for you, she said, and wiped the blood off. Epilogue. The butler did it.
If you'd like to support us, visit our merchandise store, T-shirts, caps, mugs, and so much more. Visit doorwaytonightmare.com today.